All right, so we are live. I am Zakia, your host of Real Talk with ZSJ, and I'm delighted to have Brother Dr. Jared Ball here as my first guest. We just had actually a robust conversation before we went live with y'all, but we're going to definitely bring a lot of that here, for all of you to experience. I wanted to give a little background just in terms of, my own consciousness raising with Dr. Ball. I was telling him that I learned of him through a grassroots organization, think tank, actually, in Baltimore, Leaders of a Beautiful Struggle. And I had been following them before I moved even, to the DMV region. And I was actually really inspired listening to a talk he had given, I believe, on the campus of Morgan State University, but it's up on LBS's YouTube page. And I learned so much, and it connected so much, right, with the book. I think I might have shared with you at some point that I read Noam Chomsky's Manufacturing of Consent. And after I read that book, I got rid of all the TVs in my house. That's been about 10 years ago now. We still don't own a television. I mean, we have streaming services, like we're not totally off the grid, but TV, news, well, we don't have any of that. But anyway, I don't want to do too much talking. I want to allow you, brother, to just share a little bit about yourself, tell the audience, for folks who may not know you, a little bit more about you.
Well, first of all, I appreciate being invited, and I'm especially honored to be your first guest. This is fantastic. Congratulations and good luck with the program. I've already seen and experienced elsewhere that you do good work here, so I'm looking forward to it. I'm a professor of communication studies at Morgan State. By the way, that talk was at our sister HBCU, actually at Coppin in down the street, right. Where Dr. Ken Morgan and others who do a lot of work with LBS, host, so. Academically, I'm a professor of communication studies. I have a background in Africana studies, and I like to let everybody know from the Africana Studies and Research Center at Cornell under the directorship of Dr. James Turner.
Yes,
the legend himself,
right.
And the best 2 years of my life intellectually to this day. I mean, I'll never get over that. It was remarkable. And just after that, I'm a father, I'm a husband. I've long been and tried to be involved with grassroots political activism and support, or be involved with any number of particularly Black radical grassroots political organizations and journalism and media projects, and then have tried to blend all of that work academically in the classroom and in my work more, generally. I've done some radio, and I curate a multimedia website, IMixWhatILike.org, which is named as an homage to Steve Biko.
All right.
And his I Write What I Like. And then when we were doing, more hip hop and mixtape and that kind of work, we just made it I Mix What I Like. And so that's, so there's a lot of great work there from me, and I think a lot of wonderful people too. So I encourage people to check it out. So that's about it.
Yeah, definitely. Please check out IMixWhatILike.org. I neglected to say, like, after I met you through that YouTube video, I went deep on your website, and I found that you did an interview with Dr. Cress Welsing. There was an interview you did, I believe.
Can I interrupt you just very quickly? I want to just clarify. I got to give all credit to my brother, Essie Ramu. He's one of our crew for sure. And I'm happy to house it at I Mix What I Like, but he put together it is a seminal meeting, the only time that doctors Cress Welsing and Marimba Ani sat together in an interview.
Yes.
So he put that together, and it's amazing, and it was in the context of Trayvon Martin's killing. So it's anyway, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to, but I just want to make sure.
Fine. I want people to know this, because I want to drive more traffic to your website. For people who don't know, it's beautiful. And you've also had Dr. Curry on. I remember when you had him on, I was like, this is amazing, because that's someone else I have a lot of deep respect for, because we'll get into this. I mean, I'm not anti-intellectual, but I am frustrated with academics. And I would say Dr. Curry, certainly Dr. Valethia Watkins over at Howard, are like a few of the people that stand out to me, like that are still true to the community in a way that you are still pushing the envelope and you're still honest. I think, even for you having a platform outside of the university where you are uploading this real righteous information, just hats off to you, because I don't plan on having nobody on this platform I don't have respect for. So anyway, let's jump right into the discussion. I wanted to talk about, certainly I want more and more people to know about your book, but I wanted to talk about first the critical media studies piece and see if you can give myself and the folks who are listening here an understanding, because okay, let me pull back and frame it. I've been frustrated with the media for a very long time, and even I would say within the last 4 to 5 years, I can't even stomach it. I mean, because to me, the blinders are off, if you will. Like, I literally watch and I'm critiquing the whole time, and I'm like, this is not news. Like, I'm driving down, places, and I'm driving in communities and stuff, and I'm like, well, why ain't the news talking about that? I mean, you know what I mean? Like, you can tell, like, they're the ones who actually create the news, and that's a spiel from the book Noam Chomsky did, Manufacturing Consent. The news is literally manufactured. But I was wondering if you would like delve a little bit deeper into that, since I know that's one of your expertise, to tell us why that is the case and what alphabet agencies have influence in that.
So sure. So obviously there are a number of pathways and avenues and streams to all of this. For me, even before getting to what is, I guess professionally or more traditional communications or media studies, for me, it came through the pathway of Africana studies or the Black radical tradition, and within that there is its own. And I got to shout her out. When I was at the University of Maryland, one of my professors, Dr. Alice Bonner, is this brilliant sister who is still doing great work. But she had what for me is a very subtle way guided me to this conclusion, or laid this out for me, I should say. In a far less overt or aggressive way than, for instance, the way I teach, and it's really brilliant. I love the way she did. I just don't have that skill. But what she showed me, basically, what she showed us, I should say, all of her students, is that within, even as we were studying within a traditional graduate program of journalism and media studies or public communication, she was showing us that within the Black, and particularly the Black radical tradition, there has always been a media criticism or what we call critical media literacy. So for instance, she had me read Baldwin's Notes on a Native Son. She just had me read the book, and she didn't lay this up. But the point was, if you just read it, it's media criticism. It's a critique of, and that is to say, the dominant messages and narratives and images, particularly of Black people, that we get are political by design. They serve a broader political function. As I would come to do it in my work, it performs, I should say, a colonial function.
Yes.
So as Fanon and Césaire and Memmi and others have been pointing out for a long time, and certainly and any number of other people, that the colonial apparatus needs to perform a psychological warfare element, and media play this function. Now, so just the quick connection, so I don't go too long, is that
no, it's fine, yeah.
That, well, just to get to those alphabet agencies, when you study the particularly the history again of Black political struggle, or the struggle of any radical groups in this country, or just even an honest study of the country, the history of this country, you see that there's a development of these intelligence agencies meant to play a particular role of maintaining power for the colonial elite white males in particular. And to do that, they were very clear in their research and their documents and their declarations that media must play a role in managing public opinion, is what Chomsky, had. And they recognize that this is where you can exert more power before you have to get to the military and the police and the National Guard, which are always behind that.
That's right.
They come first. There's military conquest, dominance. You wipe out the military of your opponent. You terrorize the community. Then you set up your institutions, and media are one of them. And then they're meant to play a role. So whether it was the OSS, the predecessor to the CIA, whether it's the FBI, whether it's
the OSS. What did that stand for? And I'll tell you, I actually learned that from Dr. Bobby Wright. I was listening one night to a YouTube video, because there's only a few of them out there. If they haven't been scrubbed already, YouTube been doing
right.
Because Amos Wilson, like a lot of people, shout out to the people that uploaded those videos. They were bad, like video quality, but I was listening to what they were saying, and I will never forget. He said, the psychological warfare piece, like, was actually OSS, and I forget what it stands for. Actually, ended up being the CIA, and I was like, I had never heard of this. Nobody talks about this stuff, man.
So, and what's funny is the Office of Strategic Services.
Wow.
And I did just look it up just to double check my own memory. Office of Strategic Services, because I forget, always forget these. But what I learned in the process of working on this buying power book is even more I shouldn't say more fascinating, but for me, or at least equally fascinating, is that the OSS did precede the CIA in terms of its function, but the name change was predicted actually in a Hollywood film prior to the name change officially within the federal government. So,
wow.
in a book that I cite all the time by Alfred and Secker, National Security Cinema, they talk about and I forgot the movie, but I reference it in the book, but they talk about there's this particular movie, and I forget the year, but preceding the development of the CIA. So this was, late 40s, probably early, maybe even, right around there. Maybe even a little earlier that in terms of the film, but within the film, there's a line that says something like, "We need a central intelligence agency."
Wow.
And then that, of course, becomes the CIA. Emerges out of that, and even within their own documents, within their own involvement with the development of mass communications as a field, and mass communications as a phrase meant to be a euphemism for propaganda. The CIA said we need to be involved in manipulating public opinion in preparation for any number of things, whether it's to convince people that democracy and capitalism should be wedded as concepts, or whether it's to prepare people for a change in government, or any number of different operations or plans, or to prepare people for a military takeover of a community that will then, which is meant to precede the development of American businesses and wherever, which is usually what goes hand in hand. So they have been long involved in developing any number from creating, planting agents as journalists, developing journalists into assets, literally writing the scripts of popular television.
I hear Anderson Cooper. I don't, I will say this. I read, and I'm sorry, I can't remember where I read it, but I read somewhere that actually Anderson Cooper from CNN was an intern, or he worked at the CIA at some point in his life before becoming Anderson Cooper that we all know on CNN. So I was just making that connection when you said that, a lot of them had connections, or they would embed journalists who were actually agents.
Well, I mean, historically, we know that the lesser famous of the Woodward and Bernstein duo, who did the Watergate, scandal, Bernstein, he long ago in the 70s exposed by the hundreds in terms of CIA agents performing as commercial journalists.
Wow.
Nowadays,
I did not know that.
yeah. So that he exposed that 50 years ago, 40 years ago.
Wow.
And since then, but nowadays it's even worse, because if you turn on main commercial media, they don't plant anybody. They just have CIA assets and agents literally on there speaking
literally
on behalf of
there talking. Yeah.
Or reporting as stenographers what intelligence representatives want to be out in the public. So it's playing out right before our very eyes in a way that's even more pernicious and insidious, because it doesn't even get questioned. It just is taken as not only natural and normal, but people accept that what they hear from intelligence agencies is solid, accurate, honest information. And we've almost been encouraged to collectively shut down our critical thinking capability to ask, why would these people be here? And in the parlance of the people doing this, they call it message force multiplication.
Wow.
By planting assets and military representatives, former generals, former NSA directors. These are the people that MSNBC and CNN always go to when they want to have a conversation about war or government or whatever.
And that's what I meant by when I said I literally watch when I do watch the news, which is very rare. It's oftentimes, honestly, when I go into a restaurant. We live in the DMV.
Right.
Well, you're in Howard County. I know y'all don't claim the DMV, but
well. Then I don't want to speak for Howard County, because I was born in DC. I briefly went to school, which I think is funny because of the school I went to, which is a bougie private school. I went to a private school briefly in Baltimore. I now teach in Baltimore, and then I live right in between. And I grew, where I grew up out here, right in between. So I claim everything.
I know that's right. I know that's right.
And I want to say quickly, shout out to Tim Hicks of Cornell West Theory. I know you're talking about hip hop, DMV or district DC hip hop, because some of these cats in DC are rebelling against the DMV moniker, which they say is wiping away true Black DC. So I want to respect that argument, especially coming from a man, So I think this is legit. So I do claim it, and then respectfully, I don't.
Right. No, I was just poking fun because I'm not from here. My husband is a native Washingtonian. He's from here, and all of his, immediate family is here. My mother-in-law and all them live in PG County. But I actually found out about the beef, if you will, because folks in Baltimore be like, we ain't the DMV.
Oh, no.
We Baltimore.
Baltimore doesn't want to be even the DMV. I mean, look, it's these colonial boundaries and identities get real. We get real sensitive over our colonial identities. So your husband, you have to have maybe a very extended and high level conversations about these territorial lines.
Oh man, it's interesting, but now that's a little caveat. But what I was saying was, I go to Bus Boys and Poets, which is a eatery in this area, and they actually are coming to Howard County. They're supposed to open one in Columbia, but when COVID hit, I think it got moved back. But anyway, they have CNN on all the time. And I don't know if you know much about Andy Shalal, the owner, but he is a progressive liberal or whatever. And that's the only time, like, I literally see the news, or when I go over a family house or whatever, they'll have the news on. And I'm just like, fear. Like, they literally on CNN, they got the COVID numbers up on the side. I mean, they got everything is just like, and it's just like, and to your point, like when it's time to go to war, especially when they took us to war, that we now know was a lie, the whole Iraq war. The entire time, I didn't see any real investigative journalism. In fact, I think real investigative journalists have actually been pushed out. I don't know, if you want to talk, or if you know much about Gary Webb and the book that describes what happened to him. Absolutely. I mean, do you want to talk a little bit about his work and what happened with that, Gary Webb?
Well, I mean, I don't want to be claimed to be an expert here, but Gary Webb and Dark Matter, it was the work, if I remember correctly, the title. Basically, long story short, he exposed that the CIA and other intelligence agencies actually were involved. I don't want to put words in his mouth, and I don't want, because it's often misrepresented, the specifics of it. But he was basically showing
there were congressional hearings about it. Like, it's real.
Saying in terms of what was, my memory isn't in all cases to be trusted, so I don't want to be. But essentially, he was showing that the CIA and the DEA were involved in putting crack cocaine in Black and other communities for sale to fund their illegal operations. Long story short, and his career was destroyed. And then after they banned him from work, they made it almost impossible for him to earn a living as a journalist. This is before the internet blew up, even though he was one of the first people to actually go viral on the internet, or to blow up in a big way on the internet when he broke this story. They destroyed his career, and I did actually look this up. I don't mean, and then, after his career was destroyed, years later, while some say he was starting to make a comeback with returning to sort of public life and work, he was found dead in his apartment, where I remember reading the door was locked. A note was on the outside of the door, alerting people to what they were going to see when they came in. And he was found, I believe, at his desk with a suicide note written on his either computer or typewriter, and 2 bullet holes in his head.
2. Right. I remember 2.
And I remember reading how there are medical doctors, and I believe even the coroner who made a medical explanation for how this could happen, where you could shoot yourself and put 2 bullets holes in your head. But I just found it to be just a very odd,
these people have people in every profession. That I think we need to just, and I don't think people think about it like that. I do. And, I suffer the consequences sometimes of like just thinking about this stuff sometimes, because it can get very dark, right? Mm-hmm. Because when you think about the level of sophistication, right? One of the things that I tell people all the time, and with the advent of social media, particularly with Twitter, when I see like beefing specifically between Black people, I was like, man, COINTELPRO has evolved. I said, if people think that COINTELPRO has, like, just because we found out about it, like, that the FBI somehow said, oh, no, we're not using this as a tactic anymore. It just evolved.
And just a quick side note to that, or that while he was coming through Baltimore a couple of years ago, the real Rick Ross came to one of my classes at Morgan State. I have to get the tapes recorded somewhere. So we actually had a little bit of a chance to have him talk and tell his version, because at the tail end of that story that Gary Webb breaks is Rick Ross getting those drugs to sell, to become one of the biggest drug dealers in the history of the country. So anyway, it's
I have a very personal connection to that as well, in terms of the whole how crack blew up, particularly in Black communities and all across the country. Both of my parents were actually impacted by that as an 80s baby. And I don't think we talk about that a lot. A lot of the children of that era, we're now in our like early 40s and stuff. And I think the only other celebrity that I've seen talk really publicly about how it impacted their parents is The Game, the rapper. And him, like, for me, it was very early. Like, I was very young. I think I was 2 or 3 years old. And, my mom and my dad, ended up, going to prison and everything for it. But I think about that experience and how, thank goodness for extended family, at least in my, state. But for a lot of people, if they didn't have extended family, a lot of those kids ended up being, wards of the state. I mean, it was bad. It was really, really bad. And unfortunately, my mother never really fully recovered. So that actually fuels my activism. You know, it's
Listen,
fuels the
I'm
work that
not
I do.
often. I get it. I'm not often. In fact, I'm never encouraged to share. But look, I was impacted as someone who passed through as a user
Yeah,
in high school,
yeah, yeah,
and so all I can say is having. I fully understand, and I'm sorry, but I'm fully understand how some
yeah.
people could not make it back out.
And
That
some people
is it.
didn't. Yeah,
I would never disparage since then I have never looked down upon or disparaged people quote unquote dismissed as junkies
right.
ever since, because it is like Rick
Right.
James said, it's a hell of a drug.
It's a hell of a, it was a hell of a
And
thing.
I
Yeah.
mean, sometimes we do talk about it in terms even in of media criticism and even sometimes in the
The
classroom.
media was complicit in
Absolutely,
calling babies in the 80s crack babies.
absolutely.
Now that wasn't the case for me. Thankfully, my mother wasn't using while she was pregnant with me. It was after I think maybe I was around 2 years old when she just really fell off. And it was a very traumatic time as a little toddler. Like there's things that actually still impact me. As you know, for children and babies, the first 5 years are really one of the most important times of a young human's life in their
Mm-hmm.
development. And if you can think about the level of trauma that children like me, right, Black children, the masses of Black children who were impacted by these devils, we're talking about Ronald Reagan, Oliver North, and all of
Oh
these
man,
devils, you know what I mean? They literally sat up behind a desk and scripted all of this shit.
they did. Well, I mean, they certainly. So this is sort of even the way they talk about it in terms of media and propaganda.
That's right.
They it's so I'm struggling with the way you say the term script, because sometimes I'm thinking about my own students in the classroom where there's almost too much power given to what they're trying to do, or too much foresight. So I'm always careful that on the one hand we can never overestimate the amount of money, effort, research,
Right.
and desire they have to destroy ours and any number of other communities and movements and politics. But at the same time, they are not this all powerful, infallible, undefeatable, opposition.
Sure.
So in other
Yeah.
words, what I mean to say is that the script is less vague. They don't have every line written, for
That's
instance.
right. Yeah.
So they just drop this in the community, and then they can say, let's see what happens.
Let's see
We
what
can
happens.
predict what will happen. We can encourage something to happen. We can take advantage of any number of different outcomes. But there's never a perfect level of sureness of being that they can bring to bear on it. In other words, there's always room. I'll put it this way: when I was in the Navy, my job was to be on a 50 cal machine gun on the side of an aircraft carrier, and the
Wow.
reason we were there. It sounds wild, but in the context of an aircraft carrier, it was like I was Arsenio Hall's character in Harlem Nights when they're shooting out outside trying to kill Eddie Murphy, and everybody's shooting a machine gun. Not Arsenio Hall, but his man is with the little pop gun. Maybe that's too old a reference for some. I don't know. Maybe I didn't carry that over. But my point is, relative to the aircraft carrier, what we had was very insignificant. But the only reason we were there was because the high-powered technological weaponry, from aircraft to fast-moving, what they called R2-D2 with a penis. Those high-powered weapons that shoot thousands of rounds a second, like that stuff was too powerful to deal with a small, slow moving sort of analog per se type of response. In other words, it has always been something I think about when I think about how we have to deal with this powerful beast, so to speak.
Yes.
That this powerful entity, the most powerful weapon you can have in a military, an aircraft carrier, had this vulnerability that required two regular knuckleheads standing on the edge of a flight deck on a catwalk with a 50 cal machine gun that we would have to deal with.
Right.
Because if you come at it in a small moving boat or a helicopter, it's too much. The weaponry the fancy weaponry can't handle all of that. So my point is that they can never figure out exactly how to deal with well-organized grassroots efforts, whether it's militarily, whether it's in terms of media, whether it's in terms of any number of, and that's where I always try to find some hope and some sustenance to continue moving forward, even as sometimes the opponent can seem
insurmountable.
Insurmountable. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, no, I mean, I struggle with that too. I have to tell you, sometimes I get discouraged because just being in conversation sometimes with people. And then there are also times when I'm encouraged, like, oh, okay. I feel like there is some awakening, so to speak. And somebody asked a question about, wanting to know Jared's thoughts on how the media is manufacturing consent for Americans to take the coronavirus vaccine. I actually posted about this. I said, and it said recently suggesting that Bill Clinton, W and Obama will take it live on TV. I will answer a little bit of this because I said it myself. I said, damn, they're desperate. I said Obama equal Jim Jones. Now you may not feel that way, but that's how I feel.
Oh, you went hard. All I was gonna say is, well, I even in my head, it sounds is way too soft now that you laid it out that way. But all I was going to say is Obama ruined it himself by fake sipping that water in Flint.
And Flint, everybody keeps talking about that. Yeah.
So I mean,
a lot of people talked about that. Yeah.
Now you're going to come out and what? For real, take a vaccine? You're going to fake take a vaccine? I don't know. I think honestly, I've been on the one hand, it's easy to see how mainstream media would encourage the use of any pharmaceutical produced in this country. Mm-hmm. Well, not only because they're about to get paid with our tax dollars in terms of Pfizer getting $2 billion in promised purchases, but the pharmaceutical companies own all of those media outlets. So of course they're going to be able to promote and encourage whatever they want.
Can you dig into that point a little bit? I'm glad you brought that up because I don't think at least a majority of people know that our corporate owned media and TV generally is owned by 6 companies?
If that, yeah, at the most it would be 6. At this point, it may even be fewer. But essentially, in I believe it's 1932, the Federal Communications Commission basically gave away access to what are still supposed to be our public communicative networks to private companies to use for the common good. They can make money off of them.
Public-private partnership, huh?
Well, but that's the other. It's always been a public-private partnership.
Yeah.
The state itself is only created to facilitate individuals ruling, whether it's through corporations or through some other means. So, the state signs off on corporate chart. I mean, the state gives license to corporations. So there's always the corporations, as we saw, over the summer. Use the state. They've captured the political apparatus of the state to extract all of the wealth from the country for themselves. So so there's always been that relationship. But essentially what was supposed to be and still technically are the public's airwaves are just given over to these private entities with the understanding, at least theoretically, that they would do public good, inform us, entertain us, not lie to us, not propagandize us. And I'm forgetting the exact order that was signed, but it was under Obama's watch that he signed something I think it was under one of those National Defense Authorization Acts that made it now legal for the first time for the federal government to propagandize its own citizens. So now, so anyway, so corporations initially just took over the mechanisms of our media and our communication so that they could sell products and, more importantly, sell the bigger concepts that make us think all of this is okay.
Right.
Like democracy is freedom, capitalism is freedom, all of this, socialism is bad, communism is bad,
Yeah.
African culture and history is bad,
Yeah.
all of that is
It's
bad.
all been demonized.
Yes.
Yeah. And
Uh,
these things, and that's actually why sometimes I say I stay away from the isms, because sometimes because of the isms and the programming and the priming that has happened through the propaganda that you're talking about, people will turn off. They'll just shut any kind of conversation down. And so you have to talk about it like literally in the most practical terms. And one of the things that you and I talked about this before we went live, that one of the things that I've been struggling with is that we're literally in the midst of an evolving economy, and an economy that is evolving to become more and more technocratic, meaning, right, the jobs that, or the working class sort of pretty much low wage jobs, in essential worker jobs like driving taxis, even working in restaurants. I don't know if you're familiar with the concept of is it called ghost kitchens, where they got robots in there. I mean, so all of these things are happening slowly in certain parts of the country. Autonomous driving vehicles, right? I've been on a deep dive, like studying what the people at the World Economic Forum is talking about, Davos, all of these different kind of people. And I'm oftentimes like, why in the media talking about this? Like, why in the media preparing people for autonomous driving cars, smart cities, and all of this shit? And I'm oftentimes, I'm viewing all of this stuff on YouTube, literally from Elon Musk. I think Google, which is on this platform that we're on now, YouTube, they're even introducing an autonomous driving vehicle called Waymo. They are literally introducing them in 2021 in Arizona and California. California has also outlawed by 2025, and some people may see this as a good thing, and it probably is, but the combustible engine car, like gas driving cars, you're not going to be able to drive those after 20, or buy them after 2025 in the state of California. So like, we're literally on the cusp of, by 2030, our entire world we're going to look around and everything is going to look different. But the problem that I have, especially in this last election, Dr. Ball, and I wanted to get your feedback, was that the presidential campaign, all of these politicians, it's like it's all theater. They ain't talking about no real shit, brother. Like, they're not talking about what's coming. They're not talking about, okay, we're going to have to shift the tax code, or we're going to have to do this or do that to make sure, right, like the masses of our people can be taken care of. And that is what I struggle with. And so now you have people who will struggle with you, right, in your book, and say, well, I need to open a Black business. How the hell am I going to take care of my family? You know what I mean? Like, I need to do this, or I need to figure out a stream of income, so that I can take care of my family. I have to do this. So I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about I know that was a lot, but the contradictions, and also like the real fears and the real, like, holding on to this idea that our people really have. It's real.
So, I mean, there is a lot there because there's a lot going on. First,
right.
Before I forget some of it, I think it's fascinating that that history of I believe it was General Motors and others working in the early 1920s or 30s to destroy what was a burgeoning electric mass transit system all throughout California that was, efficient, clean.
Nikola Tesla was behind that. They destroyed him.
and they got rid of that and replaced it so they could put in all the highways so that they could have everybody buy cars and create all the, the industry around that. And now that industry is dying along with the planet, they are looking to find new ways to be the first to capitalize off of the coming. Look, this is why I think it's fascinating to see on the. Now I'm probably gonna. You're gonna have to rein me in here probably because when I look at what, for instance, when you see the white left, which I think is fascinating that they won't even talk to Michael Moore about his last movie, and his friends. Amy Goodman and Naomi Klein and whoever, all of these big name white lefties have turned on him in terms of talking about his film, because what he's saying is basically what I was just thinking of is that as soon as the planet's dying and everybody's catching up to the fact that we need to do something else, they're running out to claim the same corporations and entities who have been doing this are now the ones running out to tell us that they have the solution and are funding all of the greening and all this other stuff that isn't working. It's not only not working, but it's enriching the same entities that created the same problem. And Michael Moore does this Planet of the Humans film, or he executive produces it at least. I've watched it twice. I think it's amazing and terrifying. Can you name
the film for folks so they can watch it?
Planet of the Humans.
Okay.
And you can see it for free on YouTube. After they sent, his buddy censored it, they got it kicked off YouTube. I was like, this is Michael Moore. This is your boy. This is the white left superhero. And even he, as a multi-millionaire white left superhero, can't even get.
No, they've been dragging him. They dragging anybody that's trying to tell the truth.
So I'm saying, so all of this is happening, and then as you're talking about, I heard, sometimes I check in on other platforms because you're not going to get it in the mainstream media, and I'm listening to a random Fox Business conversation where they're talking to people who go to these World Economic Forums and
I've been listening to them too, yeah.
And to your point, they were saying, everybody's losing their job, the economy's shifting, or in other areas dying, but they're looking at how much money they're going to make, not because of all people moving onto the streaming services, but because they're buying up the technology that makes all of this possible.
Right.
So they're like, in the discussion I heard, it was really interesting because the interviewer said, but it sounds like you're saying to invest outside of the United States. But the United States has Facebook and Google, and those are the biggest companies. So why would you do that? And the response was, but the technology that makes Google and Facebook work is developed outside of the US. And that's where all the money is. So while everybody's moving to Zoom and we're doing all of our own YouTube, this and that, we're starting our own this and that, they're investing in the technology that creates all of this possibility. So even as we do this, and it relates perfectly to what I'm trying to point out in the book, is that as we do this, and some of us will be successful, some of us already are very successful with these platforms. Some people have a tremendous followings and make, even relatively speaking, decent livings in a few cases. But while that is happening, the truly powerful and wealthy are making even more money off of that process.
Billionaires have grown. Think about this. And I kind of went in on this I had a little impromptu video the other day on Giving Tuesday, because I just was really just vexed, because I said, the nonprofit whole industry is growing while the responsibility of the government is continuing to shrink, even under Democrats. So I try to get our people, as in Black people, to think a little bit more critically and deeply about how we're starting to choose to deal with the political process. Not discouraging people from voting or anything, but I do think that we need to engage in a way that's going to be actually, if it's possible, that's going to be beneficial to the masses of us. We have continued to see, Dr. Ball, over the years, not an increase in prosperity in our material conditions. We have continued to see and continue to see a decline in our material conditions. When you think about the homelessness in this country, and I've seen it, because before COVID, I was hopping planes and traveling all over the country, all over the country, east, west, all over, west, south, middle, everywhere. And no matter what city I went to, the homeless enclave was always full of Black folks and Black men in particular. And I'm in social justice work, and I'm like, why is nobody? I'm going to all these highfalutin conferences that people done probably spend $500,000 on. I'm keeping it real, and we driving past homeless encampments while we're going to talk about social justice work.
That's right.
And so that to me, I started to see a disconnect. And I started to see that everybody has actually bought in to the disposability of Black people and a certain class of Black folks. And that is what I am so disturbed about, particularly in this last election. The left, well, I don't want to say the left, I would say Democrats and some mainstream civil rights organizations made it all about Trump. I mean, I get Trump, he's a symptom, but really, we had a lot of this shit before he even came into office. If we want to be honest about it, like, he didn't create racism.
When
people literally, I mean, yeah, go ahead.
I just need to look this up real quick, unless you know off the top of your head. When did Sam Yet write The Choice?
Yes. Oh, that's a good one.
Because
he wrote in 1970.
1971.
I was about to say 72. You got it.
The issue of Black survival in America. I mean, he was saying in the year of my birth already, the economy is, Black people have already been moved out of the economy.
We moved out.
The plantation work is no longer needed.
Right.
The technological advancements are coming. Black people are not going to be included, and Black people need to figure out what needs to be done. And then there was this famous, or not famous enough, media component to his argument that he made, where he talked about being in China. And forgive me if I have this somehow wrong, but so definitely people should check me on this. But essentially, the conversation that he had with a Chinese leader over at the time was, the Chinese leader said something like, "I saw American television and I saw the way Black people are being depicted on TV." And he said something like, "How can you expect," something to the effect like, "How can you expect to survive as a community if that is how your country depicts you on TV?" I'm not doing the point justice, but his point was, if we look at how you're depicted on in the projection of your community into the public sphere, suggests that you are in line for something bad coming. Mm-hmm. And I think all these years later, Yet would be looking down on us and saying, "I'm trying to tell you." And everything.
His book was actually shadow banned. It's hard to find that book, and he actually took a lot of heat.
I have it somewhere.
Yeah, no, he took a lot of heat. He took a lot of heat, and I want to say he was punished. Didn't he have a job somewhere? And was
if I remember correct, I mean, he had a commercial media job. He had, I think, like a New York Times or New York. I mean, he had some kind of big time, but he was pushed out either because of the book or because he was already expressing ideas that will go into the book. I can't remember exactly his story. But I was just trying to point out the fact that there have been people trying to argue this for a long time, that we're not paying attention to the trends.
We're here. Yeah.
And then here we are, and things are only not worse now because there is a highly propagated perception that either things aren't as bad or that help and hope is around the corner. And that's why, sort of to connect some of these strands of thought, why we see so much energy put into popular media in any different number of forms to convince people not to think in different ways. That's why we're saying, people are saying, at best, vote for a Democrat, wait for Biden to give us, now they're talking about what, half of what even Trump was offering to give before,
man.
And we're supposed to but I just watched a renewed debate among some white academics about socialism and capitalism, again, trying to, I think, make the point that as people would naturally start to think at this point of a different economy, whatever ism we want to call it, we're getting more projected images in favor of capitalism and Black capitalism as solutions to all of these problems. And we're getting very soft, liberal, mainstream conversations and analysis heavily propagated across platforms, well-funded all over the place, and well-positioned all over the place to limit the range of conversation that we might have to assure that our public opinion doesn't go too far to say any number of different things, but something other than what we're doing now, which is what obviously needs to happen.
Right. And I want to, as we wrap up, because I know it's late, but you and I both have families, so I don't want to keep you too long, but we want to wrap up. This has been great so far. But I want you to talk about, I like the idea of the redistribution of the GDP. You are probably one of the few people that I've ever heard say it that way, like in terms of like a reparations kind of program. And I have to say, outside of like reparations or some kind of redistribution of wealth, I want people to understand that there are people in power who are basically throwing up their hands like, yeah, most of y'all ain't gonna make it.
So, I was just telling somebody earlier today, what I argue in the myth and propaganda of Black buying power is really the softest argument I've ever made publicly. I think like it's because I'm in many ways trying to avoid some of the beef over isms, at least in the case of just trying to lay out this myth and how it works and why it's, I think, a major problem.
Right.
But and even in this discussion of reparations, there's been, I know, some misunderstanding or misrepresentation and some, so in the book, I don't argue for reparations. And in part, there's a number of reasons, but in part it's because I think that, to your point, white people overwhelmingly, a great amount of even Black people of non-Black or non-white, non-Black diaspora and other communities, a lot of people are not interested in voting for a redistribution of the country's wealth just for Black people. We can't even get SB 1083 and HR 40 passed for a study. I mean, they don't even, and then the argument just becomes, well, look at all of us, we're all suffering. We didn't have anything to do with slavery. And so to try to avoid all of that, I was just trying to say, well, why don't we go for the biggest pot that's out there and make all of it moot? Not that I don't think Black people deserve reparations. I absolutely do.
Because the United States gave other groups reparations, and they
right. But you have to look at even how that. But that's sort of part of why I don't want it, because look at what happened with that, though.
Right.
The Japanese lost billions of dollars in worth in land during World War II, and they were given $20,000 checks. A few people got $20,000 checks. If you read Norman Finkelstein's work, the Holocaust industry, yes, Jews got reparations, but in part they got reparations from multiple countries, so it wasn't just one. But the biggest problem was that only in a handful of the elite got anything, and most people, even who suffered the death camps and survived, didn't get anything. So and yet at the same time, people could claim that they paid it off and now we can move on. So I'm not saying we don't deserve reparations. I'm just saying we need to be careful when we make comparisons to what happened with other people, because it didn't go well for them. And I want something bigger and better. Point,
because I have not heard people tell us that caveat. So I appreciate that.
And really people should read the Holocaust industry. The hustle. I mean, people.
I've never read that.
Oh my goodness. I mean, it's. And talk about people getting in trouble.
Did he get expatriated out of his community for real?
This is first of all, he's both of his parents were the only survivors in their families of the death camps. So he's very much, concerned about the story and reparations, and he takes it personally. Like his parents didn't get what they should have gotten.
Right.
Like he goes into all of it, but when he goes into incredible meticulous detail about how the money was distributed, who paid, where the money went, and it long story short, it's a big hustle, and it's an industry, as he called it. So I'm just saying, yes, we deserve reparations. I just don't want to get dragged down the hustle lane that Jews and Japanese got dragged down. Right. But the other part, though, is that I'm concerned that it wouldn't be enough. So anyway, the point about the GDP is the other, and also say, look, I'm not an economist. I read economic reports. I study the difference in terms of what is not reported in the press. But so I just wanted, and I've been testing this, and it seems somewhat logical, at least, but I'm saying we create everybody $20 trillion before COVID, at least in GDP. But it goes to the handful of 20 trillion. And what that means is that's the value of all the goods and services that are paid or paid for in a given year.
Wow.
And so what that really is saying is that is wealth created for the people who own those goods and services. So that's why a handful of 1% gets almost all of that. So what I'm just simply saying, they get it, through hiding their taxes. They get all the profit. They
have tax policy that helps them, like that literally shifts the wealth up to them.
They disappear hundreds of billions of dollars every year in taxes that should be going back to all of us. So all I'm saying is public policy sets all of that. That's legislation. That is rules. That is they are messing with the existing rules that allow them to do that. So theoretically, the rules could be reset to say, well, look, if we're creating $20 trillion, just take it away from the 1%. Let's pay less on the military. Let's pay less on the police. And let's start funding people's healthcare, housing, and let's fix up the communities. Everybody has a decent house. Everybody has good food. Everybody has healthcare.
Like, and practically, who could be against that? Who is against everybody having their basic needs met? Raise your hand. I comment in the comments. Are you against people literally having their basic? Why does anybody? I gotta say this. I found out on a call because my organization, the organization I co-founded, Racial Justice, now opened up a chapter here in Montgomery County. I live in Montgomery County, and we were on a call doing some, work here in the community, and we've been doing some statewide work around trying to repeal the Maryland Law Enforcement Bill of Rights, and also getting the police out of Montgomery County schools. And we were on a call the other night, and somebody said, "Oh yeah, there's 8 billionaires that live in Montgomery County." I said, "Excuse me?" They're like, "Oh yeah." They was like, in 1 year they didn't pay their taxes, and the school district had a budget deficit. I was like, "Why is this allowed?" 8 billionaires.
And so again, just to connect all these threads real quick, that the reason that's not on the TV, and the reason that those conversations about economics that we were talking about are not on TV, and that they're on, even just on Fox XM channels and CNBC, CNBC, the people don't watch, they're not, the reason why, and you raised this earlier, and I was going to tell the joke, which was real, is that in the early, what was it, around 2005, I was at a media reform conference, and I'm sitting in this room, and I see that sitting right in front of me is Phil Donahue.
Wow.
And for some of us of a certain age, that was as big as it got.
He's from Dayton.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
But in terms of TV personalities and talk show hosts, and even somewhat progressive and cool white folks, he was as big as it got. And I'm sitting there saying, but he was sitting right in front of me, because he had been fired from MSNBC, even though he had the highest rated show on the network, but he used it to be critical of the war. So they got rid of him. So I'm sitting there saying, if he is sitting right in front of me, there's no hope. You know what I'm saying? Like, if Phil Donahue can't get a job, then what are we really trying to do here with this media reform stuff? Like this anyway. But the point is that the reason he was sitting in front of me, the reason that, all these discussions don't happen on, the reason none of this is discussed is because the very people that are benefiting from this literally bought up all the airwaves. They spend over $500 billion in ad revenue every year to make sure that what gets programmed is exactly what they want. So it doesn't matter if the owner of the medium is Black or a woman or transgender or whatever. It could be a socialist. You could own it. I could own it. It will have no content and no audience if those ad revenue folks don't pay for it to make it happen. So they're the ones determining what goes on on TV, and with those alphabet groups that I talked about earlier, who literally write the scripts to these police shows and military dramas and all this stuff to make everybody, when I went into the Navy, they called me a Top Gun recruit because it was right after Top Gun had come out, and they said that's what made everybody want to join the Navy. Well, Top Gun 2 is coming out next year, so the same process is still happening because the same war is still going on. Right.
No, that's it. No, brother, this has been great. We are definitely almost at our hour. I did want to address this comment about Glenn Greenwald. He has actually been pushed out of his own organization. Did you see that recently?
I've been watching that very closely because I find that fascinating.
It's fascinating.
Because
he also, apparently and that's the thing, like I was talking about that contradiction earlier, is like they had to succumb to get funding to like to fund the operation. So I think they ended up like taking funding from certain people, and certain people got into
it's
the editorship.
The former head of eBay that's a billionaire that funds The Intercept. And and one of the things I think, I know there's so much I would want to say about it, because one of the things I thought was fascinating was the amount of money that Glenn and these people are making. If you heard him talking about it, I mean, he was making hundreds of thousands of dollars with private security forces for him and his husband in Brazil. They're making a lot of money. And I also have to say, I'll share with you, I thought it did cross my mind that a few years ago when The Intercept first got started, I had emailed Glenn and all of them to invite them to come to Morgan State to talk to some Black students about independent journalism, and to maybe ask why there were no Black folks involved in this new venture that they were starting.
Wow.
And I never heard anything from them.
Wow.
So, you know, I admit I'm, you know, petty enough maybe to have said, well, to turn around and see that The Intercept didn't even allow you to do what you wanted to do. Is a fascinating turn of events, because a lot of great Black journalists, which is one of the points I wanted to raise, have not been able to do the work that they should be paid a lot of money to do.
I'm telling you.
And now that I found out how much money that these cats are actually making, I'm like, I was on the right path.
Yeah, no, definitely. Well, you know, you always got a place on this platform. I definitely got to have you back. We actually had a lot of good, you know, engagement. You know, I'm sure, you know, people will share this and all that good stuff, but this has been great. Appreciate you, brother. And just, you know, continue to do the work that you're doing. And we got to, you know, have you on again. Just wanted to flag for the listeners that next week, next Thursday, 8 p.m., that'll be our regular time going forward. And I'll, you know, have some cameos here in between there sometime. But we'll have Sister Jade Irondale, Lioness Crown, on to talk about current events. There's some stuff happening with Black Lives Matter chapters she wants to talk about. Yeah, we could have got into that too. The nonprofit stuff. Talking about Sister Tamika Mallory going on TMZ and saying sexism is actually worse than racism. So people are really up in arms about that. So we're going to talk about some current events.
Well, I didn't hear that. I can't wait to watch that. I didn't hear that.
Oh, man, you got to watch it, man. Oh, man. Woo. Yeah, people been going after our sister on Twitter, been lighting her up. But anyway, so we're going to talk about that next week. So hopefully, you know, you all come back, invite people. And please, I didn't say this at the beginning, but like and subscribe to the channel and share it. This has been your second episode of Real Talk with ZSJ. Good night, everybody. Peace.